All right, here I'm going to go over two different examples using two different formulas you can use to find the margin of error if you're either given 1% or if you're given 2 percentages. So first, the one on the left in red, if we're given 1%, it says polls indicate that George Washington has a 46% support. They want us to calculate the margin of error. Now, instead of margin of error, we actually refer to this as standard error. That's why it says SE for this when you have 1%. But all you're doing is substituting in that percent and then your sample size. Now, they didn't give us a sample size, but for most political polls, to calculate the margin of error, you use 1,000 as your sample size. So we're going to use that here. So all we're going to do is substitute into our formula. So square root, make sure you have the square root over the whole thing. Now, you don't just write 46%, you want to change that to a decimal. So I would write 0.46, 1 minus 0.46. All that divided by our sample size of 1,000. So now I'm just going to start simplifying this a bit before I put it in my calculator. So I would have my square root over the whole thing. I'm going to subtract 1 minus 0.46. So I still have 0.46, but 1 minus 0.46 is 0.54 divided by 1,000. At this point, I'm just going to put this in my calculator, and I'm going to see that the answer is about 0.016, which is 1.6%. As a side note, the way I put this in my calculator, I see students make this mistake all the time. So what I would tell my calculator is square root symbol, and then I would enter the numerator, and then I want to do the division symbol and put the denominator. So I'm going to put 2 sets of parentheses. So I'm going to put the 0.46 minus 0.54 here, and then the division symbol, and the 1,000 here, and then the end parentheses. So notice that I have a set of parentheses around here to tell my calculator you need to subtract these two, and then I have a set of parentheses here saying whatever you get when you subtract that, you need to divide it by this, and then the square root of that whole thing. So let me know if you're having trouble with that. All right, let's do the other one. If you're given 2 percentages, it says polls indicate that George Washington has a 48% support and Thomas Jefferson has 45% support. So we're just going to pick one of those to be P and one of them to be Q. It really doesn't matter which is which, but you have to pick one and substitute them in the right place. So I'm just going to put P here and Q here. So I will have big square root symbol. P is 48% or 0.48. Q is 45% minus the difference between P and Q squared. All of that divided by your sample size. So again, after you have it, substitute it in, you just start to simplify that very carefully. So when I add these two together here, I get 0.93. When I subtract these and then square it, I get 0.0009. And then I have 1,000. And remember, all of that is still under the square root symbol. So just like the other one, I would enter into my calculator square root parentheses 0.93 minus 0.0009 divided, or end parentheses, divided by 1,000, end parentheses, and you would get this, which is, oops, I have an extra 0 in there, which is 3.1%. So when you give this data, you can say there's 48% support for George Washington, 45% support for Thomas Jefferson with a 3.1% margin of error.